Hi there, I'm Joey, and this is my first comic book review, I guess. I would never consider myself an aficionado or someone who's well-versed or has a lot of knowledge on the subject of comic books. I consider myself more of a casual comic book reader. I'd love to be the big aficionado with an encyclopedic knowledge of comic books, but it's an expensive hobby, and I find myself just picking up the ones I'm particularly interested in. And when it comes to comic books, I tend to just read them, digest them, and then I'm done, and every once in a while I reread them. But there's very few that I just sit and I think about, and one of them is The Dark Knight Returns. I genuinely love that book in particular. And a big reason as to why I go back to that book and why I like it so much is that it's a very layered book. There's a lot you can get out of it. You have a story about Batman dealing with his own mortality and getting older and having to get back into the cape and cowl and how the world is reacting around him. And then you also got this other layer of social commentary, of political commentary, of commercial commentary. I'm a sucker for social, political, and commercial commentary. Some of my favorite episodes of Star Trek are the very commentary-heavy ones. So I eat that crap up. So, of course, I would gravitate to Dark Knight Returns. Another thing that draws me to it is the characters. I love seeing these characters that we've all grown up with in past their prime when they're old. I think that's just an incredibly interesting thing to tackle. There's very few that I know of that have done it. I think there's Kingdom Come, Old Man Logan, which I haven't read yet. And I think it's really interesting because you have this character that was so important, and now, in the eyes of many people, this character is no longer relevant. They're old. And I love to see how I love seeing those characters interact in a world like that. For a story that has so many dark elements to it, the character of Carrie is kind of that beacon of light, that little bit of innocence left in Batman's world, and she has grown to be one of not just one of my favorite characters in that book, but one of my favorite characters in all of Batman. Carrie is my favorite Robin. Now, with any great original work, the sequel is typically not very good, and that in this case it's very true with The Dark Knight Strikes Again. Dark Knight Strikes Again has several problems. You know how I said that my favorite thing about The Dark Knight Returns is the social commentary aspect? Well, I feel that in Dark Knight Strikes Again, they had a little too much of a good thing. They have so much social commentary, so much political commentary, so much commercial commentary, that the story is lost. It is just an incoherent mess of just stuff. I think there's a good story buried underneath it, but it's just not very good. And on top of that, there is sort of an evolution or de-evolution of Frank Miller's art from the first book, which I think is pretty decent. But everything's got more exaggerated to the point that it's almost a caricature, which I don't mind so much, but I feel like the way the book is colored, it doesn't work well. It needed the muted watercolor of the original book. It would have played a lot better that way, in my opinion. Big thing I hate about that book is they turned Robin into Catgirl. I know it's a silly thing to complain about, but I actually just hate that aspect of it. So when I heard that they were doing Dark Knight 3, I was cautiously optimistic from some of the stuff I heard. I heard that they were going to put Frank Miller on a leash, which, I mean, if you've seen Frank Miller's work lately, that's a good thing. I'm not one of those people that just retroactively hate everything Frank Miller's done because of some stupid stuff he did in the early 2000s. I don't think his failures erase his accomplishments. I still think Frank Miller has done some just phenomenal work, and I don't care that The Holy Terror was a bad book. It just because it's a bad book doesn't mean everything else he's done is bad. But with that being said, his work since The Holy Terror has just not been very good, at least not in my opinion. And so when I heard that they were going to put him on a leash, I was like, oh, well, I really liked a lot of story stuff in Dark Knight 2. If they could have just that story stuff and have, you know, some other writers come in there and kind of dig some of that crap away, we could have a pretty interesting little book. So that got me excited. And of course, another thing that got me a little bit more hyped was Carrie Kelly was back to being Robin again. So let's give a brief plot synopsis of Dark Knight 3. Basically, the main bulk of the story is Kryptonians are trying to take over the world. And it's up to the Justice League to stop them. That's the basic plot. If I get any more detailed than that, I feel like I'll be getting more into spoiler territory. But that's the gist of the story. It's Batman and essentially the rest of the Justice League stopping an army of crazy Kryptonians. And without getting too far into spoilers, I feel like a big problem with this is the inclusion of all those characters from the Justice League. Batman seems to take a back seat in his own story. It doesn't really seem to be about him. If anything, it seems to be more about Superman, at least in my opinion. There's some really great moments between Batman and Carrie Kelly, but those elements don't make up the bulk of the story. Carrie Kelly, actually, I think is the best character in the entire 9 issues. And it's not because I just like Carrie Kelly. She's just the only character that seems to have a visible arc in the story, besides like maybe Superman's daughter. I think a big problem with this story is I think it just jumps around quite a bit. And this is accentuated by the fact that there are some key plot elements that are in the mini-comics. The mini-comic seemed like a really cool idea at first, but as I have come to read these issues so many times, I found them to be... I think they break the flow of the comic, and on top of that, some of these comics, like the regular issues, don't come with the mini-comic. So you're missing key issues. So that jumpiness, where the things just kind of happen, it's even worse if you don't have those mini-comics. So it's kind of like pick your poison. Either just have stuff happen with no explanation, or have the entire story stop and have an entire subplot that seems like everything else in the world is just stopping around a single event to happen. Really breaks my immersion into the story. I like the idea in theory. I like the idea of things being set up in those mini comics and paid off. But I feel like the way they did it didn't quite work. Let me talk a little briefly about the art. Now, originally when I saw the art style that they went with for Dark Knight 3, I was at first a little disappointed. And I think mainly the reason why I was looking at that original book with rose-colored glasses. The art in Dark Knight Returns is really great, and I think it's partly due to the watercolor. It has a very interesting look. And as I went back and looked at it, I found that the art in this, the line work in this, was about on par, in my opinion. And I think the reason why this didn't really sit well with me aesthetically was because it wasn't done in that same muted color watercolor style, which is something that they could have easily have done as proven by Dark Knight Returns' Last Crusade. The art in that is fantastic. I love it. The colors are perfect, and I wish they went with that style for this. I feel like it would have really, I think it really would have warmed over some fans like myself. And I think one of the things that really disappointed me is I think they were so afraid of doing social and political and commercial satire or commentary in Dark Knight 3. I think they were so afraid of it because of the overexposure those elements had in Dark Knight 2. So in Dark Knight 3, there are only 2 pages in the entire 9-issue run with what I would consider to be social commentary. And I think that's really a shame, because especially in this political climate that we're in now, there is ripe for social commentary. One of the things I really loved about Dark Knight Returns is the political commentary was not one side or the other. It made fun of both sides. It called attention to the bull crap that both the liberal left and the conservative right, it really made fun of both those. And I feel like there was a lot of missed opportunity with this story. I think it's a shame, because there's a lot of stuff going on right now that could pertain to this story. The Kryptonians, I feel like there could have been a pretty great analogy that you could have played with, and they didn't do anything with it. So from this point on, I'm going to be entering some more spoiler-ish things, so if you don't want any spoilers, go to the time code here and you can skip the spoilers. Alright, so if you're still watching, you don't care about spoilers, or you've already read the book. The whole story builds around like it's preparing for Batman to die. And eventually, Batman does die in the story, just to be brought back to life in a Lazarus pit. And he's young now. He's young. And I hate this. I hate it. I have no problem with Batman dying. Matter of fact, I really feel that the best way for this story to go is if Batman died halfway through. It really seems like that was the original intent of this story, because at the start of the story, Carrie Kelly is Robin, and then Batman tells her that she is graduated. She's no longer a Robin, she's now a Batgirl. So she's graduated, she's a Batgirl now. And then Batman dies, and now he comes back to life, and now he's young again. And the story ends with Batgirl telling Batman that she's not Batgirl anymore. She's Batwoman. And it doesn't feel right. It feels like what should have happened was Batman died, and out of respect and remembrance of Bruce Wayne, Carrie Kelly turned herself into Batwoman and even adopted the color scheme of Batman in honor of him. That seems like a much better ending. It seems like that's the way the ending should have been. It seems like that's what everything was building up to, but it just didn't. If I could have had any sort of input on the story, I think that's what I would have done. Batman's dead. Don't bring him back to life, and have the story become more Carrie Kelly focused. And I think that's why Carrie Kelly stood out as one of the better characters in this, was just because there was a lot of focus on her. And it seemed like that's the way it was going. Like this was eventually going to become her story, and it was going to be Batwoman. It really felt like that last shot of the book shouldn't have been Batman and Batwoman. It should have just been Batwoman, carrying on Bruce Wayne's legacy. So overall, we have a Dark Knight Returns sequel with no muted colors and watercolor, no social commentary, and features a young Batman. It doesn't feel like The Dark Knight Returns. It feels like some sort of weird fan fiction. And at the end of the day, I kind of wish that Frank Miller had a little bit more control over the story, that he wasn't on the leash like I read. Because I really felt like what this thing could have used was a little bit of that Frank Miller crazy to beef up the story. Because at the end of the day, I feel like we have just a very bland, boring, oh no, there's Kryptonians attacking type thing. And it left me wanting more. And I think this brings me to The Dark Knight Returns Last Crusade, the prequel to the original Dark Knight Returns. I really like this book. I feel like it's gotten a lot of undeserved hate. I've heard it called mundane, I've heard it called boring. Maybe to some people, but I really enjoyed the slow pacing of it. I love the art in it. I love the muted colors. The only thing I really don't like visually is I don't like the way the Joker looks. I think he looks kind of odd. But I really felt like this. I really felt like this took place in the world that this book set up. I don't feel that way about Dark Knight 3. I really appreciated how slowly paced the story was. And when the thing ended on the cliffhanger, it left me wanting more. And I mean wanting more in a good way. I wanted a second issue. And if they were to make a second issue or even a third issue, if they were going to turn this into like a little mini-series, what I would like to see in an upcoming issue is I would like to see just an entire issue dedicated to Batman mourning the loss of Robin. I'd like to keep that slow burn that first issue had. And have it eventually build up to a fight between Batman and the Joker. And having Batman almost reach that point where he kills the Joker, but instead puts him in Arkham Asylum. And see Batman just kind of give up. I want it to ramp up to something, I want it to ramp up. I want that slow burn to pay off, but not quite get as big as it does in Dark Knight Returns. I would like to see a more character-driven thing. Like, I want to see Batman deal with the loss of Robin, deal with his conflicting feelings about wanting to kill the Joker, and how he eventually retires. I want to see that over the course of maybe 1 to 2 more issues. I don't think I'm going to get that because it seemed like everyone hated the book, and I just don't get why. Maybe it's because it's something that we've seen before. We all know the death of Robin, and there wasn't enough tweaks in the story to make it completely unique. But I liked it, and I'd like to see more of it. This feels, if they were to continue the Dark Knight Returns universe, I would like to see more of Last Crusade and less of Dark Knight 3. Now, Dark Knight Last Crusade didn't have that commentary element that I love so much, as it wasn't as apparent in that, but I felt like its strengths overcame that. I felt like it was a very good story, well-rounded thing, that it's forgivable in my eyes, where I felt like Dark Knight 3 had a lot of missing elements, a lot of elements that could be better, and the fact that it was missing one of my favorite parts of the original book, that it seemed a lot more glaring in that. Alright, so spoiler talk is now over. I would like to show you, I'd like to give you a bit of a look at this box, like a detailed look at it, because it's pretty cool. It's awesome, actually. It's probably my favorite part of this. Probably one of my favorite aspects of this series that they did was this box. This is such a cool thing, and I'm going to show you it. I'm going to open it for you and everything. I recorded, what you're about to see is something I recorded earlier today, and if I sound funny, it was because I was fighting an asthma attack while filming. I don't know why I didn't just wait to record, but I was so excited to actually open the thing and look at it myself that I was fighting an asthma attack, so if I sound funny, that's why. So let's cut to that. Alright, so before we go over the Dark Knight 3 box, I want to quickly go over the Dark Knight Returns box. It's pretty much the same thing. This has a Jim Lee work, and I believe this is done by Frank Miller. I'm not sure. I believe this is a Frank Miller drawing. Wraps all the way around. There's Carrie Kelly in the middle. And it's a pretty good little box. I would say it's a slightly higher quality than this one, just from glancing. I haven't opened this one yet, but just from a casual glance, it looks like a slightly higher quality, but it's easily scuffed up, and you can get fingerprints all over these, which is probably the biggest drawback to the set. I like the side, the DC logo that's yellow, that really pops. I like that they have, I'm not sure if you can tell here, but the bat signal is made out of a slightly different material than this reflective stuff. Same with the cape, Carrie Kelly's glasses, and then of course Superman. Now we're going to look at the inside, and there's a little note there of authenticity. And what I really like about these is they have the original covers of each individual issue. And these are all oversized deluxe editions. And they look beautiful. The colors really pop, and I don't mean that in like they brighten the colors. I just think it just looks so much better. I'm not sure why. I've compared it to my trade paperbacks, and there's just something about having it extra large, and I think it has something to do with the paper they printed it on. Just everything looks so much better on these. It's absolutely gorgeous. I love the way these look. They've never looked better. One of the biggest things about this set that I really like, that I think it's worth the like I said, it's easily scuffed, but for the contents in here, they've never looked better. That there is no extras. If you have a trade paperback, I'd recommend keeping that, because those have more extras than this. This is just bare bones the comics, but they are in nice little hardbacks. It's just very nice. I love them. On the side, when they're in the correct order, they create a little image of Carrie Kelly. It's a very cool little book. It's a very cool little set. I like it. Highly recommend it. I got this for $26 for my birthday. Now this is the new box. This comes with issue 9, and there's the side. So it's basically the same image from the other box, but it's redone by Jim Lee. Very quality image. I like it. We're gonna open it up. Alright. And basically what this says the same thing here that it says here. And what this basically says is, over 30 years ago, writer-artist Frank Miller redefined Batman for the modern era in Dark Knight Returns. But the future has darkened and Batman is dead. Carrie Kelly tries to carry the mantle of the Bat and keep Bruce Wayne's spirit alive. With the arrival of masochistic army of Kryptonians bent on claiming the Earth as their new Krypton, Batman must return again. So that's what's in there. Kind of. I feel like I should do something with this. Maybe turn it into like a thing for cards. Before we put all this in here, I want to go over all the covers. So each issue has a pencils only version of Jim Lee's variant covers, and I'm not sure if I said this earlier in the video because I'm kind of shooting this out of order, but Jim Lee is one of my favorite comic book artists right now. I love his style. I can't tell you how many times I've picked up a comic book that I have no interest in, other than the fact that Jim Lee did the art for it. I love his work on these variant covers, but I think the biggest problem I have with them is they do not reflect what's inside the individual issues. These are glorifying the original work from Frank Miller, and as much as I love that, and I love these, heck, this one in particular, the colorized version of it, I would love to have a poster of it on my wall. I love this one that much. But it doesn't reflect what happens in this issue in the slightest. And that goes for all of them. But that being said, I still really enjoy the work. It's very beautiful. Like this is gorgeous. This is gorgeous. And this is depicting the scene at the end of Dark Knight Falls. And on the back of each one they have a black and white image with a quote from the story. That's another great one by Lee. Just awesome. This is just an awesome work. This is actually my least favorite of all the ones Jim Lee did. Nothing, it's not terrible or anything, I'm not like shaming it, but out of all of them, I for some reason I don't really identify with this one all that much. This one's really nice. I like this one as well. I think the colorized version plays a lot better. The color really makes this specific issue really pop, but still very nice. Oh, and you're going to notice something. This is not. I wouldn't consider this a legitimate complaint, But during the course, the 2 years this thing was running, DC changed their logo. And this probably doesn't mean anything to anyone except for me, because I like uniformity. But my cat just hissed for some reason. But I don't know, it bugs me that halfway through the logo changed. That's a great one. I love that one. That one's awesome. This is another one that it actually looks pretty good on my camera, because my camera is doing something with the lighting. But this one really plays better in its full colorized form. This is another really beautiful one. I really like this one. It's a very good scene from the original comic, from the original Dark Knight Returns, and I love his interpretation of it. This is very nice. And here we're coming up on the issue that actually came with this set. Very cool indeed. Carrie Kelly in her Robin form, despite that not being despite not being a thing in this issue. Very cool indeed. Alright, so let's look inside the thing. There's a very nice... These actually open better than the other set, the Dark Knight Returns set. These, when you open them, they don't feel like they're going to fall apart in your hand. That's a problem. That's another problem with that set, is I feel like they're going to break in my hands. But the colors are very vivid in this, and it's also printed on some thicker paper that I think really makes the whole event feel much more special, honestly. Very cool stuff. And then at the end of each of these, and I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but the mini comics are actually in full size, deluxe sized. This is the mini comic here. Very cool stuff. Let's see if I can show you the poster. Yeah, see, there's the mini comic, and it's huge. It's the size of everything else. And now none of these come with extras. None of them come with extras. Just like the main set. So if you're wanting extras, I recommend picking up the Director's Cut. This is Dark Knight 3 Issue 1 Director's Cut. This has some extras in it. And while I'm at it, I will discuss the Dark Knight Returns Last Crusade, which is also in the same size. As you can tell, it's the same size as the rest of them. Now on the inside, though, there is no picture. It has this indented little thing. Very pretty, very pretty. I love the art in this. Now this is very heavy. Now you see, kind of creates a picture, although right at the end there's a big gap, which is kind of to be expected. For the most part, they line up pretty well. There's some slight problems with the R, and one of the books really pops out more than the rest. But that just might be with that individual issue and not reflective of the bulk of them. So this is what they look like with their backsides facing you. They look pretty cool. Although I prefer to have the Carrie Kelly's facing outward. I just think that looks, in my opinion, I feel like that grabs your attention a little better. Yeah, I think that just looks so cool. I'm not sure if you can tell, let me zoom in. But I have trades for Dark Knight Returns and Dark Knight Strikes Again. And I also have Night Watchman Graveyard Shift, which is... I guess you could call it an homage. It's very similar to the Dark Knight Returns. It's pretty cool though. I have more comic books in a closet, but with these specific ones, they are so unique and interesting looking that I like to have them on display next to my Elrics. Alright, that's about it. At the end of the day, I feel that Dark Knight 3 had some underwhelming aspects. Carrie Kelly was the best part, and I don't say that just because I really like her character. I really feel like she was one of the few things that really shined through in a lot of the mediocrity of this thing. I feel like the art is decent, but the best thing about the whole book, I feel, is the hundreds and hundreds of variant covers. I love the variant covers to Dark Knight 3, and hopefully I'm in a better situation financially because I really want to pick up Art of Dark Knight 3, which is, I think, going to be just a big book full of just all the different variant covers, because I tell you what, I can look through those all day. They're all so beautiful, all these different artists from all over just showing their love and appreciation to The Dark Knight Returns, and it's beautiful. If you haven't seen them already, just go look through all the different variant covers for these 9 issues. They're fantastic. I think that's it for now. Thank you for watching my first comic book review. Let me know how much I sucked at it, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.